So how have we got to this point with these protests where people are being sort of hauled off the streets in mass numbers for holding up signs? It seems ridiculous, I think.
I'm here in Parliament Square in London, which recently saw the mass arrest of 857 protesters. Their crime? Holding a sign reading this. In fact, I'm not going to risk saying the sentence myself for reasons we will discuss. You can read that for yourself on the screen.
Just 1 month prior, a further 466 protesters were arrested in the same spot for the very same crime. The day after we recorded this video, it happened again. At time of recording, more than 2,000 people have been arrested across the country for the same offence.
So how do we get to the point where holding a sign can be illegal?
Last year, I made a piece which touched on the introduction of a new wave of stringent anti-protest laws here in the UK. Since then, we've had a change of government, and yet attempts to crack down on protest have continued on regardless. Just this week, the government has promised to give even more powers to the police to ban protests which are deemed too repetitive. I'm here in London to speak with Kerry Moscogiuri from Amnesty International UK.
I'm hoping she can shed some light on the state of freedom of expression here in the UK and explain why Amnesty has expressed such significant alarm over these recent arrests.
This is a new format that we're experimenting with on the channel, in which I'm hoping to chat with experts, people with power, and those critical of it.
Trying out new stuff like this is always a massive risk, and so I want to say a big thank you to the folks who support my work over on Patreon, who give us a little bit of license to experiment every now and then. We'd love to know what you think about this new format down in the comments, and we would also love it if you would consider joining some of those people over at patreon.com/Tom Nicholas. Perfect timing.
My name is Kerry Moscogiuri, and I am the Director of Campaigns and Communications at Amnesty International UK.
And what is the kind of mission and remit of Amnesty?
So Amnesty International is the world's largest human rights organisation. It started in 1961, and our mission is around promoting and protecting human rights across the world. So we're a global movement of people. We really believe in people taking action to achieve change, and we absolutely believe in human rights. So we were started in response to in the 1960s, a couple of Portuguese students raising a toast to freedom and being arrested. And Peter Benenson, the founder of Amnesty, wrote this amazing article in The Observer, which you could read now and relate to now. You know, you could just think, like, it's still real. Which is when you see these things happening in the world as an individual at home, and you feel this sense of outrage, like, how can that happen? How can someone be arrested for toasting freedom? In his words, paraphrasing, were, surely if we all joined together, something could be done. And that's what Amnesty is about, is people who see what's happening in the world and want to do something about it. But as an individual, we can't, but collectively we can. And so we've grown from there and obviously built huge expertise in human rights and understanding human rights law, developing research. So we research human rights violations globally. So we can provide evidence where governments try to say this is not happening. We can say, oh, yes, it is, and this, we've seen it. Our research is impeccable. So we're able to do that research and then build campaigns around it to achieve change. So it's all about building a world in which human rights are at the heart so that we can live together safely and peacefully and enjoyably.
Yeah, and I think when a lot of people think of Amnesty International, it is probably that work, rightly or wrongly, of kind of supporting political prisoners or human rights kind of in other countries, the sort of mythical over there. At the moment, a lot of your focus is on sort of freedom of expression here in the UK. Can you tell me what's got you so worried about that?
Yeah, I mean, our work is global and local. And for a long time, Amnesty couldn't work on issues in its own country. That was kind of the rule. Mm-hmm. And that was about protecting people working in the country and keeping people safe. But over time, because it's a democratic organisation, a movement of people, we make decisions by the members of Amnesty who come together in these big global kind of meetings to say, we need to change and go in this direction, we need to develop our work here. And as part of that, people working in Amnesty offices, sections, we call them around the world, were saying, we need to work on human rights in our own country. It's all well and good us talking about human rights over there, but they're happening here. So over time, the movement has changed so that we can now work on issues in our own country. And so that's not just here, that's everywhere. But yes, so we then in the UK, obviously, you know, in the main, you know, the UK, if you look at what's happening human rights-wise here and say China or Israel, occupied Palestine territories or China, you would say, well, it's not exactly the same in terms of how egregious those are. But they are happening here, and we need to, it's our job as a people working in the UK to bring that to the attention of the government, partly because of what's happening to us as individuals here in the UK, and we matter, but also because of the role of the UK on the global stage. So one thing that we are worrying about as Amnesty International right now is that there's this kind of trend in authoritarianism that was happening already, but is kind of a bit turbocharged by Donald Trump. So there's a kind of general thinking around what is happening with authoritarianism. And then we're seeing what is happening right now in the UK. So we're working not just on, in the UK, not just on the right to protest, although that is important because that's being eroded over time and we're all seeing that, but also on economic, social, cultural rights here too, which is a human right. So our right to be able to have a decent standard of living. So we're working on all of those rights. But yeah, you asked me about freedom of expression and right to protest. So we've seen over the past sort of several years a general attack on our right to protest, which was happening under previous government and hasn't been stopped under this government. So, and it's absolutely the case that people do have a right to peaceful protest, and the rights that we all have now, you and I have, and we all have, they've been hard won by protests. They weren't just given to us by those that are in charge of us. We win them. We win them by, trespassing. We win them by suffragettes. All of those things we win them by. And where we see governments trying to close that down, we are rightly worried. So it's our duty really to say, hang on a minute, this should not be happening here. It should not be happening now, and yet it is.
And the particular, one of your biggest campaigns at the moment is around arrests of protesters, which people might have seen on the TV for kind of holding signs, I guess, is the kind of crime. Can you explain how that can be illegal? How did we sort of get to that point?
Well, it shouldn't be illegal to hold a sign. I mean, that is basically a fact. So, so how have we got to this point with these protests where people are being sort of hauled off the streets in mass numbers for holding up signs? It seems ridiculous, I think. Ridiculous, but not funny ridiculous, like seriously worryingly ridiculous. To see these people who, for their conscience, they're there peacefully sitting, holding a sign. People of all ages and, from all backgrounds and being hauled away. And they're absolutely just peaceful protesters. That is not legal under international human rights law. So you can only be arrested for inciting violence, discrimination or hatred. So sitting, holding a sign, saying that you support an organisation is not that. So something's gone really wrong, is what we think as Amnesty International. Something's going very wrong with how we are and how the UK terrorism laws have been developed, which are really broad and vague. And that then leads to this problem where people are being scooped up under that. And, we've had an issue and talked about our concerns over what might happen with the broadness and vagueness of these terrorism laws. And that's now coming to pass in this instance. So that's how it's happening, but it really should not be happening.
And for anyone who's somehow clicked on this and doesn't know any of the context around this, can you explain sort of what these protests are about, why people have been sat in, whether it's Parliament Square, whether it's outside Labour Party conference recently, why are they there, and what is the kind of contention against them?
Yeah, so these are not protests organised by Amnesty International. These are people who are protesting around the prescription of Palestine action. And they are there as a matter of their own conscience. And so Palestine Action is an organisation that's been prescribed as a terrorist organisation, which means now that you are not allowed to, the organisation is banned, and anyone supporting them or showing some support for them is going to be criminised. So these people, as a matter of conscience, are saying, actually, we don't agree with that, and they are wanting to say that publicly, and in, crucially, a peaceful way. So they're sitting there holding up a sign, that's all they're doing. So that's why they're doing it. And they have a right to do that because they're doing it peacefully. And that's the problem with the prescription and the problem with these laws is that you end up criminalising something which shouldn't be criminalised as a result of it. So it's this kind of broad overreach really in this law. Disproportionality really is what we're worried about. It's disproportionate to be scooping up these people who are sitting holding signs. And that is kind of the nub of this issue.
Yeah. And are you able to give us a little bit of context about Palestine Action as a group and kind of what the explanation for why they've been prescribed is?
Actually, I don't know that much about Palestine Action myself as a group, right? So they're not an organisation that we work with, and I don't know much about really why the government have done this. I mean, because I think the issue is, as we will always go back to, because this is the problem, really, it's so broad how they can decide to prescribe them, that's what they've done. I mean, Palestine Action are an organisation that's about 5 years old. They are an organisation that takes direct action, so they break the law to achieve their goals, and what they want to do is to disrupt arms sales or arms getting to Israel to stop the genocide happening there. And previous to that, to stop the illegal occupation and all that's happening there. So that's what they do. That's not us, but that's what they do. And the government have decided that that they can prescribe them based on the criminal damage that they're doing. Because terrorism laws, and I'm not going to go into loads of details about terrorism laws, but the government are able to include damage to property within that, as in their description of what counts as terrorism. So they will know why they've done that. But that is basically why, and that is what Palestine Action are.
Palestine Action was formally prescribed back in July 2025.
Parliament voted to add it to the list of banned groups in a joint edition alongside two other organisations, the Russian Imperial Movement and the Maniacs Murder Cult. There it joins other groups including the IRA and Al-Qaeda.
But what is the process for banning a group in this way? What was the rationale behind adding Palestine Action to the list, and what is Amnesty doing to oppose the decision?
It comes with a really rigid restrictions, which we are now, you and I, bound by, right? So you and I have to be very careful in this conversation, which is why, we're concerned that it has this chilling effect. But essentially, yes, it means you can't show any support for them by actively saying you support them, or by wearing anything like a T-shirt or a flag or something, which says you support them, or even a badge with their name on. So it's very broad. It would scoop up people who were wearing a T-shirt or anything. And so that's, it just has this very broad reach because they are, have been criminalised. It's illegal to be part of them, it's illegal to support them.
And these are kind of sort of 2000s era law. It's like, are you able to give us a sense in what context they were sort of enacted and how maybe they've been used before now at all?
So we had terrorism laws before because lots of us, not everyone, but will remember the troubles of Northern Ireland and how those laws were put into place and managed. And some of us might remember how we weren't able to hear Gerry Adams' actual voice, like we had voiceovers for him. These things existed. But in 2000, they were brought together in the post-Good Friday Agreement, brought together under the Terrorism Act. And at that time, it was with quite a focus actually on international organisations. So that might be recruiting here or promoting their criminality here. So that's how it started. But then after 9/11, which came soon after that, then there became more of a focus on organisations or terrorist organisations that would be based in the UK also, or have a role here in the UK. So that's how it came about.
Have there always been concerns about that maybe creeping out into maybe organisations or groups that maybe some people might not like but might not feel sit within the kind of generally understood kind of definition of terrorism?
So I think I just go back to the concern that we have is about the breadth and the vagueness of it. In that case you can, and that was always our worry, of what can be swept up under that. And then once you're designated, prescribed as a terrorist organisation, all that comes with it in terms of criminalisation of any support. So it can become disproportionate in that case. So our concerns were always in the kind of hypothetical around that, because let's also just take a step back and remember that the government has a duty to keep us safe, right? So obviously it has to stop terrorism. It has to stop, it has to do what it can to stop people being harmed. I mean, that's its duty. So of course it has to do that, but it has to do it in a way that's proportionate and which is not vague and broad. So it would absolutely say we have to have laws around keeping us safe. Of course we do. But this one in particular, from its inception, we've been concerned it's overly broad and vague, and that's now where we're seeing this particular instance.
Yeah, and Amnesty is to be given permission to sort of contribute, intervene in, I think is the terminology.
Yeah, that's right.
A judicial review around the banning of the group. Are you able to explain what that sort of means to have a judicial review and for Amnesty to sort of intervene in it?
Yeah, a little bit. Although because it's a legal process, I can only say so much. But yeah, so essentially, when something like this happens, this kind of a law is made like this, then there are processes, in the UK, which are really good ones, where you're able to kind of question that on a legal basis. So that's what is happening at the moment, and we're able to intervene. So, which means provide like a statement, because we're experts in this. We're experts in international human rights law. And we're also we're also experts in human rights campaigning. So we're able to say, look, from our expert point of view, these are the worries we've got. And then that goes before the judge to help them form a view. So that's how, and so we really welcome that, and we welcome the fact that we're able to intervene and provide our experience and evidence into this.
My understanding is that Amnesty feels like maybe bringing Palestine action, where everyone thinks of their actions within the purview of the Terrorism Act, maybe is a bit of a creeper bit. Are you able to explain why Amnesty feels like they don't quite cross that line?
It's not really that is our issue, actually. And it's the disproportionality of, so it's just out of all proportion, which is what we're seeing now, where you criminalise an organisation and then you have people who are being swept up because they want to support that organisation. So that's our key concern that we are able to talk about, really, that we are able to raise, because that's what we're seeing. And we're seeing these thousands of, 1,600 people or more have been arrested. So something's going wrong with the law if that's happening, and I think that's where we need to focus. So our concern is really about the impact on freedom of expression of people who want to support that. And when they're supporting that, and they're just sitting there peacefully holding up a sign, what is going on in the world? So you go back to, how is that happening? Well, actually, these laws, how they have written, they're too broad in terms of how they're scooping up organisations and what they're saying about what people can do in terms of supporting them. But we do understand, and I just want to reiterate, there do need to be laws. It's just don't write them in a way that is so vague and broad, and you end up with this, I think, which would surely be an unintended consequence of scooping up people who are just peacefully protesting, and who really believe in what they're saying, and what they're saying does not incite hatred, discrimination, or violence. So then how do you square the circle? You can't.
It does seem to me that the issue is almost brought more attention through the prescription than maybe the number of eyes that were on it before. Do you think the government expected such a backlash? Because as you say, a lot of the people that are doing this protest are protesting the point of principle, rather than, regardless of whether they actually read the thing on the sign, are protesting the point of principle of the fact that you now can't hold the sign without being arrested. Do you think the government expected such a kind of backlash?
It's hard to say, actually, because I can only speak for myself now. I was surprised by how many people are prepared to put themselves in that position. I mean, these people are facing criminal charges, at least 6 months in jail, sometimes 14 years. So that is quite surprising, right? Enough people, that number of people are prepared to put themselves in that position. There is something going on if that's happening, right? So
we are seeing people being charged.
We are, yeah. 100, I think more than 130 people have been charged now, and so it's going through the process. So I just have to ask the government if they thought they expected it, but I don't think I did, us personally, and I don't know if we really did here at Amnesty. I think we were like, oh, that's happening, and people, We know that people are protesting, and rightly so, about the genocide in Gaza, and have absolute right to do that. And we see that in mass numbers, right? It doesn't always get the media, but mass numbers of people who really care about that. So we expect that to continue. I mean, one of the concerns we had at the beginning was, is there going to be some kind of chilling effect? Will people be worried about even protesting? So one thing I really want to say is, Palestine action are prescribed, and no one should be, unless they're prepared to face criminal sanctions, supporting them. But people should be, if they want to, protesting the genocide and protesting apartheid and wanting to see a ceasefire. And that is not affected by this prescription. So people shouldn't get confused by that.
It's not only protesters who have felt the impact of the prescription of Palestine action.
The author Sally Rooney, who has written in explicit support of the group, has said she'll be avoiding coming to the UK for the foreseeable future because she fears that she risks arrest for her comments. Journalists have also found themselves having to watch their words when it comes to covering the prescription.
Even in preparing the questions for this interview and writing these little interstitial bits, I've constantly had to think about how I am wording certain things to ensure that nothing I say can be read as support for the group. In fact, even going around filming this afternoon, we've been avoiding spots where there are police officers just because it is easier to not have to explain what we're doing and for anything to be misread.
And yet I wanted to ensure that I dedicated some of my conversation with Kerry to the core matter of the genocide in Gaza itself. What has the UK government's response been, and what should it be?
Well, it's not been good enough, by a long way. So sometimes they say some things which seem quite strong, they don't do the things we need them to do. So, for instance, the selling of arms carries on. Very belatedly recognising Palestine as a state, not taking a strong enough stand with our partners in terms of like the US and what we can do to influence the change there. Still investing in arms companies that sell arms to Israel. So there's so much more that the UK government should be doing, should be much stronger. Some of the statements made at the start were deeply worrying. So we are continually calling on the UK government to step up and do what they can, do much more. So, 65,000 people more than have been killed there, and, thousands and thousands more injured. It is a genocide. UK government hasn't accepted that. They're one of the, it's almost impossible to understand how they haven't, when, we have, and we, as I said at the beginning, our research is impeccable. We have understood it to be a genocide. The UN has understood it to be a genocide. It is a genocide. The UK government are still not in a position they feel to say that. So they should be doing a lot more. And there's such a strength of feeling here in the UK. People want them to. But we're watching a genocide live on our TV screens and we can't bear it. So the UK government should be doing much more, and it should not fall off any of our agendas. We have to keep going.
I was going to say, actually, so I think December 2024, I think Amnesty International, at least on an international level, decided that through research that this constituted a genocide. I think if you were to ask a senior politician in the UK government, they would sort of say something about words not mattering too much, or why, from Amnesty's perspective, is it really important to label it such?
Well, because you have to name it for what it is, right? Sometimes this gets positioned as like a war of two equal sides. It isn't. So a genocide is being put upon a people, and people need to understand the seriousness of that. The crime against humanity that is. So it's very important in a war of disproportionality, I keep saying, but, in terms of weight of world power, that we need these important words that have been there for a reason, international law, international standards there for a reason, to stand up for people who are the victims of power. And that's what's happening here. And if we're not able to name it for what it is, then it could be too easily dismissed as one side and another side. It is a genocide. It's horrendous. And people need to name it as such to understand that.
And what would Amnesty International like to see the UK government do that it's not currently doing?
Well, understand it's a genocide. Use all of our soft and hard power to make our partners, who our ally is Israel and the US, to come to the table and make sure there's a ceasefire, stop the apartheid, stop the genocide, obviously release the hostages, and make this stop. It's a horrendous thing. And I think what we as Amnesty feel, but I'm just talking now as a person, in the UK, watching this unfold and thinking, how are we not doing everything in our power all the time to stop it? How can the government go to bed at night thinking, well, I've done everything I could to stop this? Well, they're not. And this is happening in real time in our lives. So that's what, it should be top of their agenda. Our kids are studying history, like what happens when things happen in the world and how awful that can be. We all know that. And so we don't want to be the people looking back and going, oh, that happened on our watch. Can't.
So to what extent is or isn't this part of a trend?
The prescription of Palestine action hasn't been the only cause for concern surrounding freedom of expression and human rights in the UK in recent years. As I discussed in my video about Just Stop Oil last year, the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act 2022 significantly curtailed the right to protest in the UK. Just 2 days after I spoke with Kerry, the government announced plans to grant the police even more powers to shut down protests which are deemed too repetitive. We've also seen the introduction of the Online Safety Act, which comes with some potential for the curtailing of freedom of expression, and an attempt to introduce digital ID cards, which are wildly unpopular among the British public.
I wanted to wrap up our interview by asking Kerry to place these arrests of protesters in the wider context of the state of freedom of expression here in the UK.
You mentioned that there's been a few things in recent years that have similarly maybe felt like they've encroached upon protest law, whether that's the, can I get the right order, sentencing crime bill, crime court sentencing.
One of those word salads, yeah.
Which really cracks down on what you can and can't do in protest. I think slightly before that, I think famously like noisy protest.
I was going to say noisy protest,
illegal. Being a public nuisance became quite the sort of vague law. We've also seen digital ID being brought back as a proposal, which I think some people have concerns around. To what extent do you think we are? Is there a trend here, or are these isolated things that we just need to sort out?
I think we worry it might be a trend. Yes. Digital ID cards, a whole different matter in terms of the concerns we have there, which are around sort of digitisation, use of data, and the safety around that. In terms of protests, that has really, there has been a creeping, like shutting down of protests. And you look at some of the laws that come in and it kind of feels like they're dealing with a specific method of protest at the time, like, climate protesters might do a certain technique and then they'll sort of outlaw that technique, and another technique will come and they'll want to outlaw that technique. So it definitely feels like it is, because you can look at other laws closing that down. And we are very concerned about that because people do have a right to protest, and it's really important to us as people and as the UK. Like we're good at standing up for what's right, and when people want to do that, should be able to do it as long as it's peaceful. We are worried about that. We're worried about it here. We're worried about it globally. We are worried. Like Amnesty generally, when it takes a look back at what's happening in the world, we see a trend towards authoritarianism that we are worried about, and know that people need to resist. We can't be having this happen to us. We need to stand up for our rights, because our rights are hard won. Our rights are not just given to us kindly by governments. We have to win them, and we have to make sure we keep them. So, it is a worry that there's this kind of closing down of protest, and we should all be watching out for it, because when we want to stand up for something and we want to do it peacefully, then we should be able to.
Thank you so much, Kerry.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
Oh, it's been so nice to meet you.
Thank you so much to Kerry for sitting down to chat with me, and the whole team at Amnesty for helping to arrange that. As I said at the beginning of this video, this is a new format that we're experimenting with, so we would love to hear what you think, and if you really like it, then we would love it if you would consider supporting what we do over on Patreon.
Making good, earnest videos for the internet takes a huge amount of time and effort behind the scenes, which means that good videos about current affairs and stuff like this are becoming fewer and further between.
If you'd like to help us keep doing this and to ensure that topics like this get covered, then I would be extremely grateful if you would head on over to patreon.com/Tom Nicholas and to help us keep this show on the road. And of course, no video would be complete without a big thank you to the people who already support my work over on the top tier on the Patreon, who are Richard, Gary, Dick on Spain, Bill Mitchell, ZC Reese, Zoe Alden, Alexander Blank, Neil Zabildgaard, Sophia R, Sergio Suarez, Richard Rapoon, Amit Singh Parahar, Gabriel Koch, Jimmy Dunn, Fiasco Linguini, Agent Maxwell, Glenn Sugden, Emil, Jarabar, Yillimson, Paulius Edicus, Sam Fortunato, and Sondre Yarsin-Jean. If you want to join them in getting shouts-outs in videos, access to my weekly blog, The Friday Update, copies of scripts to videos, early little snippets of stuff we're working on, then you can do so over at patreon.com/Tom Nicholas. Thanks so much for watching once again, and I'll see you in the next video.